I walked into that restaurant in a wrinkled gray dress carrying a faded canvas bag that looked as if life had chewed on it for years. My shoes were worn thin. My hair was tied back in a messy knot. I looked like a woman who had been defeated long ago, and that was exactly what I wanted them to see. But what I heard the moment I stepped through the door stopped me cold. Miranda Winford, my daughter-in-law's mother, was adjusting her diamond bracelet under the warm lights. She leaned closer to her husband and whispered with a sharpness that cut through the room like a knife. "This is her Leo's poor mother. She looks ruined. I hope she doesn't embarrass us tonight." I froze just a few steps behind them. They had no idea I was standing there. They had no idea their words hit me harder than any slap, and they had absolutely no idea who I really was. They saw a poor, naive, wrinkled woman in a thrift store dress. They didn't see the crisis negotiator who had handled billion-dollar corporate breakdowns. They didn't see the woman who earned $40,000 every month. They didn't see the person who had once convinced a CEO to step away from a ledge during a financial collapse. No, they only saw what they understood: clothes, appearance, the surface. I stayed silent. I watched them laugh. I watched them straighten their immaculate suits and designer dresses, believing I was nothing more than an inconvenience Leo was forced to bring along. But as I stood there listening to every word, something inside me shifted. I felt that calm, familiar click. The same calm I felt before every high-stakes negotiation, the calm that always came right before the truth surfaced. That night was supposed to be a polite dinner, a simple family gathering. Instead, it became the moment the Winfords exposed themselves. It became the moment Leo finally learned who his mother truly was. And it became the night I discovered just how far people will go to judge someone they believe is poor. What they did not know was simple. I had walked into that restaurant pretending to be weak, but I had not spent a single day of my life actually being weak. And before the night was over, they would learn exactly who they were dealing with. People say simplicity is a choice, but in my case, it became a habit, a quiet discipline that followed me through storms and victories alike. My name is Quinn Marcel. I am 62 years old. I negotiate high stakes for a living, corporate collapses, executive meltdowns, financial fires that would crush most people. I am the quiet voice companies call when everything is falling apart. I earn $40,000 a month, breathing life back into sinking empires. But no one outside my work knows that, not even my own son. My apartment reflects that secrecy: modest, clean, lived in, a beige sofa with softened edges, curtains faded by sunlight, ceramic bowls I bought at flea markets. Nothing about my space screams money, no fine art, no rare sculptures. Just the simple items I learned to live with when life was tight and I had a child to raise alone. I was rinsing out my mug when my phone buzzed on the counter. Leo's name appeared on the screen. His calls always arrive with a certain warmth, the kind that never left him even as he grew into a man with burdens of his own. I picked up. "Hi, Mom." His voice was unusually small. "Leo." "Is everything all right?" I asked. He inhaled sharply before continuing. Yes, everything's fine. I just wanted to ask something." I leaned on the counter, sensing the hesitation more clearly than the words. Silence in negotiation often says more than dialogue. With my son, it was no different. "Go ahead." "So, Clara's parents are visiting. They want to meet you. We're having dinner on Saturday." There was a pause. Not long, but heavy. Then he added, lowering his voice as if afraid I might break Mom, "Just dress simple, okay?" A soft sting pricked me behind the ribs. Simple. As if I had been anything else in his eyes. I allowed myself a faint smile he could not see. "Of course, Leo." He exhaled in relief. "Thanks, Mom. I'll text you the address." After we hung up, the quiet in the kitchen felt different. Not the comforting quiet of dawn, but the thoughtful kind. The kind that presses against your chest and makes you revisit memories you thought had settled long ago. I placed the mug into the sink and dried my hands on a towel. My reflection in the small window above the counter looked exactly as Leo imagined me. Simple, soft, forgettable. A woman who blended into old walls and quiet corners. But beneath that surface lived a lifetime of endurance and a skill set most people would never expect. I walked to the living room and sat for a moment, letting the weight of the invitation settle. Clara's parents, the Winfords. I had heard enough from Leo to paint an outline. Wealthy, appearance conscious, the kind who measure people with the speed of a scan. Shoes, clothes, posture. They draw conclusions before a word is spoken. I wondered how they would react if they knew the truth about me. Then I wondered how they would react if they believed the opposite. The knock on my door came while I was lost in thought. 3 quick taps. Only one person knocks that way. I opened the door to find Elodie Tran standing there with her floral grocery bag and her signature smirk. At 58, she is the kind of neighbor who sees everything without ever appearing nosy. She eyed me from head to toe. "You have that look on your face." "What look?" "The look you get when you're about to commit a harmless crime or a social experiment. Which is it this time?" I stepped aside and let her in. Leo invited me to dinner with Clara's parents. Elodie placed her bag on my table and let out a dramatic gasp. "Oh, the Spa Dynasty couple, the one he said owns that Vineyard Hill mansion." I nodded. "He asked me to dress simple." She raised an eyebrow. "Simple? As if you don't dress simple every day. I think he meant poor." Elodie burst into laughter so loud it startled the cat from the apartment downstairs. "Poor? Quinn, if only he knew your wallet could swallow mine for breakfast." Her laughter softened and she leaned closer, narrowing her eyes playfully. "Wait, why do I feel like you're planning something? Are you trying to cosplay a broke woman just to test them?" I couldn't help but smile. "Something like that." Elodie covered her chest with one hand in feigned shock. "Oh my, the queen of corporate fires wants to test the Winfords. Should I bring popcorn?" I ignored her theatrics and walked toward the closet in my bedroom. "Elodie, I want to see how they treat someone they believe has nothing. I want to see their honesty, their instinct." Her expression softened. "You think Clara takes after them?" "I don't know yet. That is why I need to see the source." Elodie nodded slowly as if understanding more than I had spoken. "You've always had that instinct. To read people, to test pressure points, make sure you don't lose yourself in the process." I appreciated her concern. I really did. But this time, it wasn't about power or test. It was about truth. I opened my closet. Clothes hung neatly, work suits, crisp shirts, neutral tones. Then tucked on the far right, I saw it, a dress I had kept for no rational reason, light gray, loose, wrinkled despite being washed, fabric worn thin around the seams, the dress I wore when I walked into my first real job 30 years ago, the dress of survival. My fingers brushed against it. Elodie stood behind me, her voice low. "Oh no, you're really going all in, aren't you?" I didn't look at her. I just let the memories flood in. Nights I worked until dawn. Mornings when Leo slept in my lap while I typed reports for clients who would never remember my name. The years when my bank account held less than my courage. I lifted the dress off the hanger. The fabric sagged, gently tired yet persistent. "Yes, this one will do." Elodie sighed with surrender. "Then may the universe protect the Winfords, because you are about to teach them a lesson they will never forget." I folded the dress across my arm. The air in the room shifted, light, calm, determined. And as I closed the closet door, I knew this was the beginning of something much larger than a dinner. When I pushed open the heavy glass door of Winford and Cumber's steakhouse, the warmth inside hit me like a soft wave. The quiet elegance of the place contrasted sharply with the cold evening air behind me. One step in, and I could feel eyes glide across the room, pausing just long enough on my thrift store dress to decide I did not belong. A hostess near the podium let her gaze drop to my worn shoes before lifting it back to my face. The smile she offered was thin and practiced, the kind of smile reserved for customers who might lower the average bill of the night. I kept walking. The marble floor beneath me felt colder than the street outside. Crystal chandeliers reflected off polished wine glasses. The low murmur of conversations floated through the air, steady and elegant. I knew I looked out of place, and that was exactly the point. Then I saw them. Miranda and Benedict Winford stood near the table Leo had described. They were angled toward each other like two trophies placed for display. Miranda's dark green velvet dress clung to her frame, sparkling under the lights. Benedict adjusted his collar as if preparing for a magazine photo shoot. Before they noticed me, I heard their voices. "Is that her? Leo's mother," Miranda whispered sharply. "I told you she would look like this." Benedict glanced at me and nodded with satisfaction. I hope Leo warned the staff. A place like this needs standards. Their words did not pierce me. They simply chilled me the way a draft moves through an old house. For a moment, time stretched thin. I had heard similar whispers before in corporate boardrooms, where men tried to measure my worth with their eyes rather than my achievements. I knew how to handle that silence. I stepped closer. That was when Leo spotted me. Relief washed over his face, followed immediately by embarrassment. He hurried toward me and placed a gentle hand on my shoulder. "Mom, over here." His voice carried apology more than welcome. We walked to the table together. My seat was at the far end, politely distant, strategically unimportant. A seat for someone whose presence was more obligation than desire. I sat down without comment. A young waiter approached. His eyes moved quickly from Miranda's jewelry to Benedict's watch, then finally to my faded canvas tote bag. His expression shifted in a single blink. I could almost hear the calculation's small tip. "Water is fine for now," I said. Miranda seemed pleased by that simple choice. A moment later, Benedict crooked his finger at the manager. Not a gesture of courtesy, but of ownership. The manager approached with a professional bow. Benedict leaned in and whispered. His voice was low, but I could hear every word. "Please keep an eye." "She looks like she might not afford the meal." I kept my face still. My fingers pressed lightly together under the table, a grounding technique I had used in high-pressure negotiations for years. Stay calm. Stay in control. Comedy slipped in despite the tension. Miranda tapped her manicured nails on the table and whispered to Clara beside her. "I just hope she doesn't order anything extravagant." Clara offered a thin smile. Her eyes avoided mine. She did not have her parents' cruelty, but she had inherited their discomfort. Next to me, Leo rubbed his hands together. His knuckles whitened. "Mom, they can be a little—" I touched his arm softly. "It's fine, I'm fine." I was not fine, but I was prepared. The waiter delivered menus. I knew every dish and every price range of restaurants like this. Years of business dinners and corporate negotiations had taught me more about upscale dining than Miranda or Benedict could imagine. But tonight, my role was different. I opened the menu for 3 seconds, then closed it. Miranda tilted her head. "You finished looking already. I like to eat simple," I said calmly. "Oh, of course." The waiter returned to take our orders. When he stood between us, Miranda leaned in, giving me a smile that was soft at the surface and sharp underneath. "So Quinn, what exactly do you do?" "Cleaning. Assistant. Something small." The question dropped onto the table like a stone in water. Cold, heavy, deliberate. I did not look at her immediately. Instead, I watched the people around me respond. Benedict lifted his eyes from his phone, curious. Clara pressed her fingertip along the rim of her glass. Leo's breath caught in his throat. Then I placed my hands on the table, lightly, steady. My heartbeat remained level. This evening was no longer just an experiment. It was exposure. Not of me, but of them. I lifted my chin, ready to answer. Miranda's question hung in the air like a chandelier about to fall. What exactly do you do? Cleaning, assistant, something small. She said it lightly, but the intent behind it was heavy. It was a test, a jab, a probe for weakness. I lifted my water glass and let the silence stretch just long enough to unsettle her. Then I answered with a soft, almost apologetic tone. I just help with paperwork here and there. Little things. Miranda's eyebrows rose with satisfaction. She had expected humility. She had expected inferiority. I offered both deliberately neatly folded and handed to her like a gift she did not deserve. "Oh, Quinn," she said with a sigh that dripped with pity, "you must have such a difficult life. That kind of work is so unstable, so exhausting. I cannot imagine living month to month." Benedict nodded while cutting his steak. People like that learn to stretch $1. Admirable, really. Their words struck the table like darts. They were not meant to wound, but to label, to shrink me, to place me in a tidy category where they could feel superior. I smiled back, warm and serene. People like me, I said softly, learn to survive without depending on others. Miranda froze for half a second. She did not expect a response that was both gentle and unbending, a response that rolled her pity into a tight ball and handed it back to her with a ribbon. Comedy slipped into the tension when the waiter returned with the wine list. He raised the bottle proudly. "This one is our most popular. The Vineyard signed a 5-year development partnership with a crisis consultancy firm. That firm practically saved them." My fingers tightened on my napkin. I knew the company well, too well. I was the one who negotiated that exact partnership. I knew every clause, every number, every strategy behind it. But tonight I was a poor mother in an old dress. I widened my eyes and nodded politely. "Oh, that sounds fancy." Miranda laughed in delight, mistaking my restraint for ignorance. "It is fancy. Benedict and I visited their vineyard in Italy 2 summers ago. We were given a private tour. They do not offer that to everyone." She said it loudly enough for the tables around us to hear. The waiter poured the wine. Benedict swirled his glass like an expert. Clara took a polite sip. Miranda closed her eyes and breathed in the aroma. Then she shot me a glance of triumph. "Quinn, you probably do not drink wine often. This one might be a bit advanced for you." I touched the glass stem with 2 fingers, feeling the cool surface. "You are right," I said. "I do not drink it often," which was technically true. After negotiating a vineyard's multi-million-dollar crisis recovery, you tend to avoid their wine out of sheer exhaustion. The conversation rolled forward as Benedict began detailing the recent expansion of his logistics company. He used the word global 3 times in 2 sentences. His voice lifted with pride, but the numbers he listed told a different story. They were shrinking, scaling back, trying to survive a competition they refused to acknowledge. Miranda leaned closer to me. "Money is not everything, of course, but it does help maintain stability. Leo grew up simple, so I suppose it did not matter to him." My fork paused mid-air. There was the blow, wrapped in silk, delivered with a smile. She continued, "We gave Clara the best: international schools, private tutors, travel, culture. She grew up prepared for a bigger life. Leo is lucky she chose him." Leo stiffened beside her. His eyes dropped to the tablecloth. I placed my fork down carefully. "That is generous of you," I said. "Truly?" Miranda nodded proudly. Then she leaned in even closer, lowering her voice. "We want Leo to focus on building his future. He has a good career, but he comes from simple beginnings. We do not want unnecessary burdens on him." My pulse slowed. I recognized this tone. It was the tone someone used right before presenting a contract filled with invisible traps. Miranda reached for her purse. Her fingers brushed over the leather as if measuring the conversation by its weight. "Quinn, we have been thinking," she said with a sweet, brittle smile. "We could help you. Just a little. Nothing dramatic. Maybe $300 a month. Enough to ease things." The table went silent. Leo's face drained of color. Clara's fork stopped mid-air. Even Benedict looked up from his wine. $300. Not to support me, not out of generosity, but to buy distance, to buy silence, to buy an absence. I sat perfectly still, letting the moment sink into the fabric of the evening. My heartbeat stayed steady, almost too calm. Miranda continued, "You know, so Leo does not have to worry so much. You would not need to call him often, or rely on him. It would make life easier for everyone." There it was, the truth beneath the kindness. Weaponized pity, weaponized generosity. A waiter passed behind me carrying a tray of desserts. The scent of burnt sugar drifted through the air, oddly grounding. I placed my hands in my lap and spoke quietly. "That is thoughtful." Miranda brightened. She believed she had succeeded. Her expression glowed with the smug relief of someone who thought she had solved a problem. But she did not see the shift in my posture, or the way my eyes sharpened, or how my voice grew steady, deliberate, unshakable. She did not hear the collective inhale of the table. She did not sense the weight of what was coming next. This dinner was no longer a test. It was a turning point. I raised my head and looked directly at Miranda. "Tell me, Miranda," I said calmly, $300 a month. In exchange for what exactly? Her smile faltered, and that was when she realized she had made a mistake. Miranda's smile wavered, the first visible crack in her polished armor. She had expected gratitude, maybe even relief. What she received instead was silence, so still it echoed. I let that silence breathe for a beat before I spoke again. My voice was steady, calm, almost gentle. "Miranda, can I ask you something? How much did you help Leo and Clara during their wedding?" Her chin lifted proud to the point of trembling. "Oh, a great deal," she said immediately. "We covered most of the reception, the floral arrangements, the photographer, the venue upgrade. That alone was $15,000. Then the honeymoon package. And of course, the designer gown. Clara deserved something elegant. With every item she listed, her voice grew brighter. She was not describing generosity. She was describing ownership. "And did you offer those things freely?" I asked. "Or were there expectations attached?" Miranda blinked. The question caught her off guard like a gust of cold air through an open door. "Well," she said, smoothing a non-existent wrinkle on her napkin's support, "always comes with a certain understanding. It helps guide a family toward stability." Guide. A pretty word for control. Benedict chimed in while adjusting his cufflinks. "We simply wanted the wedding to reflect our values. Nothing wrong with setting a standard." Clara's fork paused midair. Her eyes flickered not at me, but toward her husband, toward the table, toward memories she suddenly was no longer sure she understood. I leaned back slightly, letting the faint music of the restaurant settle behind us. Then I asked the question that sliced through the evening like a clean blade. "Tell me, Miranda, has money ever bought you genuine respect?" The entire table went quiet. Even the waiter walking past slowed for half a second. Miranda's smile vanished. Not gradually, entirely. Her fingers tightened around the stem of her wine glass until the knuckles whitened. "What is that supposed to mean?" she said. "It means I answered that respect built on fear or obligation is not respect at all." Benedict drew in a sharp breath. Leo stared at the tablecloth as if trying to protect the fabric with silence. Clara's eyes lifted to meet mine. For the first time since I had met her, she looked awake. Her face tightened, not in anger, but in recognition, like someone hearing a quiet truth that had been whispering to her for years. Miranda laughed once, an unsteady sound. "You think we buy respect? That is absurd. We simply maintain standards. We provide stability. We give our children the best environment. That is what good families do." Her tone rose with every sentence sharp enough to be heard by two nearby tables. She did not want to lose control of the narrative. That fear clung to her like static. I folded my hands on my lap, aligning each finger intentionally. Presence often speaks louder than defense. "Respect," I said, "is something people give when they feel safe, not when they feel indebted." Miranda scoffed, but the sound wavered. "That is the most self-righteous thing I have heard." Opposite her, Benedict cleared his throat loudly, eager to redirect the attention. "Well," he said, reaching for his phone, "some of us actually know the value of money management. Our accounts are always in top shape. That is why we are able to help others." He adjusted his chair, lifted his wrist, and tapped his banking app with the confidence of someone about to prove a point. Clara flinched, her fingers curling against the edge of the table. I watched Benedict tilt the screen, likely preparing to display a healthy balance as silent victory. He tapped, waited, frowned. The glow of the phone illuminated his face and the color drained from his cheeks. What on earth, he whispered. Miranda leaned in. "What is it?" He turned the screen toward her. A red banner stretched across the top of the screen. Suspicious activity detected. Temporary block in place. Miranda's eyes widened. "What did you do?" "I did nothing," Benedict hissed. "This must be a mistake. My accounts have never been blocked." He tapped again, and again. Each attempt returned the same warning, same red banner, same cold stop. Around us, the restaurant noise continued, wine glasses, clinking soft chatter, silverware tapping plates. But at our table, everything froze. Leo leaned closer, whispering with concern. "Dad, are you sure everything is fine?" Benedict wiped his forehead with a napkin. "That account is for business transactions. It cannot be blocked. There must be some ridiculous glitch." Clara's voice trembled. "Dad, when did this happen?" Just now, he snapped. "Do not make a scene." But the scene was making itself. Miranda's breath quickened. Her hand fluttered to her necklace as if checking whether it was still there. Leo's eyes darted between his in-laws, his confusion deepening with every passing second. Then Miranda turned slowly toward me, not with accusation, but with something far more revealing. Fear. Fear wrapped in suspicion. I met her gaze, calm, steady. I had not touched their account. I did not need to. Life had simply chosen a very precise moment to show them how fragile their control really was. The waiter returned with dessert menus, oblivious to the tension. Would anyone like something sweet to finish? Nobody answered. The silence grew thicker, denser, as if pulled directly from Benedict's locked account. I placed my napkin on the table and spoke quietly. Money protects people only when they know how to handle it. Otherwise, it turns against them the moment they depend on it too much. Miranda inhaled sharply. "What are you implying, Quinn?" "I am not implying anything I said, but it seems your evening of certainty has shifted." The words landed softly but firmly, like a hand pressing to a wound that had just begun to bleed. The table stayed frozen in place, and that was when I realized the first reversal had begun. Not because of anything I did, but because the truth always arrives, whether people are ready or not. Benedict's phone screen was still glowing red when the weight of the silence settled over our table. His jaw clenched, and the rigid line of his shoulders told me he was losing control faster than he could process it. His fingers trembled as he tapped the screen again now with the desperation of someone trying to restart a failing engine. "Why is this happening?" he muttered under his breath. Miranda leaned toward him, her voice tight. "Calm down. It is probably a temporary check. Just breathe." But her own breath was shallow fast. Fear moves quietly before it becomes loud. I sat back, folding my hands in my lap, not relaxed, present, attentive, the way I always sat during crisis negotiations, because this right here was no different from the boardrooms where I had spent 20 years helping powerful people hide panic behind polished smiles. Benedict's forehead glistened. Sweat collected at his temples despite the cool air conditioning. He dabbed at his skin with a napkin, trying to maintain the image of a composed man. But image always cracks first. Miranda's voice rose again. "Benedict, stop tapping it. You are making it worse." Her tone was sharp enough that two women at a nearby table glanced over. Leo shifted uncomfortably beside me. Clara clasped her hands together, knuckles white. The atmosphere was no longer awkward, it was combustible. I watched each face as if I were tracking the trajectory of a storm. Miranda's denial, Benedict's collapsing confidence, Clara's dawning clarity, Leo's silent apology forming in his eyes. Every expression was a sentence in a conversation no one dared voice. My phone buzzed inside my tote bag, a single vibration, light, perfectly timed. I slid it out and glanced down. Elodie. "You okay? Remember, don't fight with words. Use silence. That scares people the most." My lips curved slightly. She was right. Elodie always had an instinct for these moments. She had watched me mediate messy situations between neighbors, business owners, even families who refused to talk to one another. She knew the truth. Silence is a weapon when used with intention. I slipped the phone back without replying. My quiet was my answer. Quinn Miranda snapped, "Suddenly, do you know something about this? You keep looking so calm." Her voice trembled. The kind of tremble people get when they fear they have lost control of the room, not just the situation. I met her gaze without blinking. The stillness between us thickened. She shifted in her seat. Her eyes darted to Clara as if seeking reinforcement she did not receive. I tilted my head slightly, not confrontational, not defensive, simply present. Miranda misinterpreted the silence as judgment or truth. Her voice cracked. "You cannot just sit there staring. Say something. You always have this superiority aura. Why?" The irony nearly made me laugh. Me, inferior in her eyes 30 minutes ago, now intimidating her without speaking a single word. That is the thing about people who wield money as their language. When their currency fails, they panic like children who have lost their vocabulary. I inhaled slowly, letting the restaurant's warm lighting settle across the table. Then, without raising my voice, I said, "I have nothing to explain, Miranda. But it is interesting how quickly quiet moments expose what people fear most." Her mouth opened, then closed, then opened again. I could see her trying to form a comeback, a retort, a justification. Nothing came. The silence pressed down harder. Across from me, Benedict suddenly pushed his chair back. The legs scraped against the marble floor with a jagged sound that cut the tension like a blade. That sound dragged me back. For a split second, I was no longer in the restaurant. Flashback. A different room. A corner office at the top of a 40-story building. Night sky. City lights trembling through floor-to-ceiling windows. A man standing on the ledge inside the office, 1 foot lifted, as if testing the distance to the ground. His voice shaking. "I ruined everything. They will destroy my family. There is no way out." I remembered the weight of his despair, the way I moved closer without startling him, the way I asked the question that anchored him back into his own body. What is the first thing you would fix if you chose to live? Not why are you doing this, not step down, but what next? His sobbing had cracked into breathing, his foot lowered onto solid ground. It took 3 hours. And the next morning, a room full of lawyers and PR specialists took credit. But I had learned something crucial that night. People reveal who they truly are when their control fractures. Flashback ends. And now Benedict's control was fracturing. He gripped the table's edge, knuckles pale. His breathing grew heavier, uneven. He pressed his lips together until they thinned into a straight, violent line. "I cannot believe this," he said. "My accounts never get flagged. I have systems in place, fail-safes." Miranda tried to soothe him. "You are overreacting. Just sit down. We will figure it out later." But Benedict's panic had momentum. "No, this is serious. My business account should not be blocked. There must be a breach or something worse." He stood taller, though his hands kept shaking. Clara whispered, "Dad, please sit. People are staring." And they were. The waiter, the nearby tables, even the bartender, all watching a man who built his identity on wealth struggle to breathe without it. Miranda's composure finally snapped. Her voice rose shrill. "I told you not to use that card so carelessly. Now look where we are. Benedict glared at her. This is not about the card. You never understand the pressure I handle. Their voices escalated. The tension crackled. Even the soft restaurant music could not drown it out. I observed the scene exactly the way I once observed crisis boards, with patience, precision, and the cold understanding that truth always surfaces when ego breaks. Then suddenly, Benedict pushed his chair back again, this time with force. He stood upright, stiff as a bolt, his breath quick and shallow. We need to go. Now. Miranda froze. Clara gasped. Leo blinked rapidly, unsure what to do. Benedict grabbed his coat with shaking hands, nearly knocking over a glass. The evening had shattered. Not because of me. Not because of any confrontation, but because their own fears had finally caught up to them. Benedict's declaration hung in the air like smoke. We need to go. Now. He stood there rigid, clutching his coat, breathing hard. Miranda touched his arm, trying to steady him, but he jerked away. Clara looked down at her hands, cheeks flushed, while Leo stared at the table, as if wishing he could sink into it. Before anyone could move, a waiter appeared with a silver tray. Here is your check, whenever you are ready. He placed the leather bill holder on the table with practiced ease. The timing was uncomfortably perfect. Benedict exhaled sharply, sat back down, and snatched the bill. His eyes skimmed the charges. The muscles in his jaw twitched. This is ridiculous, he muttered, reaching for his wallet. Let us get this over with. He slid his black card into the bill holder and closed it with a snap. The waiter carried it away. We waited. The seconds ticked slow and heavy. Clara fidgeted with her bracelet. Miranda pressed her lips together, tension pulling at her spine. Leo's foot tapped under the table. I watched quietly, hands folded, just like Elodie had reminded me. Silence is stronger than any knife. The waiter returned. His smile had disappeared. I am so sorry, sir. Your card was declined. Benedict blinked twice like someone slapped awake. That is impossible. Run it again. Of course, sir. The waiter disappeared. Miranda leaned in. Try the business card instead. This happens with personal cards sometimes. Daily limits. But her voice lacked confidence. It trembled around the edges. When the waiter returned, he held the bill holder as if it were radioactive. Sir, unfortunately, the second card was also declined. The nearby table, 2 women and a man looked up immediately. They exchanged quiet whispers. A soft, "Oh no," drifted across the room. Shame moves fast in elegant places. Benedict's face turned an alarming shade of red. That is nonsense. My cards never decline. There must be something wrong with your system. The waiter stepped back cautious. Our terminal is functioning correctly, sir. Miranda swallowed audibly. I told you this is why you should not keep all accounts linked. If one is flagged, others might. Enough, Benedict snapped. The room tensed around us. The soft clinks of silverware from other tables grew louder in contrast. The restaurant manager appeared suddenly, smoothing his tie. Is there an issue at this table? Before anyone could answer, he glanced at Benedict, at the sweat on his brow, the trembling hands, and misinterpreted everything. Sir, due to the disturbance and the repeated card problems, we have called an officer to ensure everyone's safety. Miranda gasped. What? That is insane. We are not criminals. But the manager's nervous expression said he wasn't taking chances. Upscale places often fear chaos more than crime. And then I saw him enter. Officer Ray Delgado. Tall, broad-shouldered, dark uniform with sleeves rolled up slightly at the wrist. His presence shifted the air. Calm, controlled, familiar. He scanned the room and walked toward us with purposeful steps. Miranda straightened her posture, preparing to demand an apology. Benedict wiped his forehead again. Clara hid behind her hair. Leo whispered under his breath, "This is unbelievable." Ray stopped at our table. Except, he was not looking at them. He was looking at me. Ms. Marcel, are you okay here? The table froze. Miranda blinked, confused. Clara's mouth parted slightly. Leo's eyebrows shot upward. And Benedict, who had spent the entire evening trying to prove his superiority, sank back into his chair. I nodded once. "Hello, Officer Delgado." He smiled with an ease that told the entire room we knew each other professionally. To be precise, 3 years ago, I had helped him negotiate a small hostage situation at an elementary school after the suspect refused to speak to any male officers. I had been called in as a civilian mediator. A frightened father had walked out unarmed 30 minutes later. Ray turned to the manager. "There is no issue here. Ms. Marcel is one of the most capable people I know. If she says things are fine, then they are fine." The manager blinked rapidly, suddenly pale. "Oh, my apologies. I did not realize." Miranda stared at me as if she were seeing a stranger, someone she could not categorize, someone she could not belittle. Ms. Marcel Ray said again, "Do you need anything?" I shook my head softly. "No? Thank you, Ray." He gave a polite nod, then stepped aside to keep watch discreetly. The entire restaurant was now watching us. Benedict cleared his throat, trying and failing to recover. "We still need to settle the bill," he said, voice cracking. The waiter looked terrified to speak. I reached into my tote bag with unhurried grace. Not dramatic, not showy, just steady. My fingers brushed against the smooth metal of the card case I rarely used. I pulled it out slowly, deliberately, letting the movement speak louder than any retaliation. Then I placed my platinum card on top of the bill holder. Light, effortless, a sound barely there, yet louder than anything said all night. Clara covered her mouth. Leo's eyes widened. Miranda's breath hitched. Benedict froze completely. Ray Delgado, standing a few feet away, hid a small smile. And I said only one sentence, soft as a pin dropping on glass. "Let me take care of it." The leather bill holder disappeared into the waiter's hands, and for a brief moment, the entire restaurant held its breath. 30 seconds. That was all it took. 30 seconds for an upscale restaurant to run a platinum card. 30 seconds for a room full of strangers to reevaluate everything they thought they understood about the woman in the thrift store dress. The manager himself returned with the receipt. "Ms. Marcel, everything is processed. Thank you." His voice carried a new tone. Not obligation, not apology, recognition. He placed the receipt gently, almost reverently in front of me. I signed it with a steady hand. Across the table, Benedict and Miranda watched as if witnessing an illusion they could not decipher. Clara stared at the card as if it radiated heat. Leo kept his eyes on me, torn between awe and confusion. I folded the receipt, slid it back toward the manager, and only then did I lift my gaze. I think I said calmly, "It is time I explain a few things." Miranda stiffened. Clara's lips trembled. Leo leaned forward, his hands pressed together, waiting. I spoke the way I spoke in boardrooms facing collapse. Measured, warm, unshakable. I negotiate corporate collapses. That is what I do. When a company is burning from the inside, when executives panic and lawyers spill paper across conference tables, they call me. Benedict blinked. Miranda's breath hitched. I earn $40,000 a month, sometimes more depending on the crisis and who needs saving. Clara gasped so softly it barely reached the table. Her shoulders curled inward, her cheeks flushed red. Miranda opened her mouth, but no sound came out. I continued. I live simply because real wealth does not need to be loud. It does not need diamonds. It does not need theatrics. It does not need an audience. The truth settled like dust in sunlight, visible, heavy, beautiful in its simplicity. Miranda looked like she had been struck. Her hand flew to her necklace again, gripping it as though it might anchor her. Her throat tightened around whatever words she wanted to form. Clara bowed her head. When her tears slipped onto her napkin, she did not try to hide them. Shame has a way of unclothing people quietly. Leo's voice shook when it finally emerged. "Mom, why did you never tell me?" He sounded young. Not in age, but in innocence. like someone realizing the story they believed about their own mother had always been incomplete. I reached out, placing my hand over his, because you never needed to know how much I made to know how much I loved you. Money does not raise children. Presence does. His fingers tightened around mine. Across from us, Miranda managed a whisper. So all night you were playing a role. Her voice cracked on the last word. I shook my head gently. No, I was observing. Benedict swallowed hard. Clara wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. I continued keeping my voice low enough to remain dignified, but firm enough to cut through the space between us. I did not come here to brag. I came here to see how you treat someone you believe is poor. Miranda's face paled. Her fingers released the necklace and dropped to the table. Even Benedict sat straighter, as if bracing himself for judgment that was already written. The restaurant was not silent, but the world inside our table was. I looked directly at Miranda. Her expression twisted panic-battling pride. I needed to know the truth, I said. Not the image, not the performance. The truth. She blinked rapidly. The sound of her breathing filled the brief gap between my words. You judge people by the cost of their clothing, by how quickly a waiter assumes their tip, by how quietly they accept insults. She flinched. You offered me $300 to stay out of your daughter's marriage as if I were a burden, a problem to pay off. Clara covered her face with both hands. A strangled sob slipped out. Miranda looked at her daughter, then at Leo, then back at me, as if searching for an exit she could not find. Her lips trembled. You tricked us. The accusation was barely audible, but it landed. Her eyes filled with something raw, not anger, not humiliation, recognition, because she knew she had revealed something far uglier than arrogance. She had revealed exactly who she became when she believed she held power. I did not raise my voice. I did not lean forward. I did not assert superiority. I simply held her gaze and let the truth sit between us. You tricked yourself, I said softly. Miranda recoiled slightly, as if my words hit her physically. Silence returned. Not the silence of power this time, the silence of consequences. Ray Delgado shifted in the background, watching the tension with the practiced calm of someone who had seen households crumble behind closed doors. The waiter at a nearby table froze, pretending not to listen. Clara looked up at her mother with red-rimmed eyes. "Mom," she whispered, broken. "What were you thinking?" Leo turned toward Miranda, too. Not with anger. With disappointment so sharp it stole the air from the room. Miranda pressed her napkin to her lips, her hands shaking, and that was when she whispered the line that would define the entire night. You tricked us. Not loud enough for the room, only for me, as if she needed someone to blame for the mirror she had been forced to stare into. The table stilled. The candles fluttered. The chandelier above us cast long shadows across the linen, and I knew the mask had finally fallen. Miranda's whisper still hovered in the air like smoke rising from a burnt match. You tricked us. I folded my napkin calmly, placing it beside my empty plate. My voice was low, steady, without sharp edges. I did not trick you. I allowed you to reveal who you are. The words did not slam into the table. They settled slow, deliberate like dust, finding its true place. Miranda's mouth opened, but nothing came out. Benedict, however, found his target immediately. This entire thing escalated because you embarrassed us, he snapped at Miranda. If you had not made such a scene over that silly $300, none of this would have spiraled. Miranda whipped her head toward him. Me. You are blaming me. You are the one whose accounts are suddenly blocked. That has nothing to do with this, Benedict shot back, although the panic in his eyes said otherwise. You provoked her. You humiliated us. I humiliated us, Miranda repeated, voice rising. You sat there bragging about money you clearly do not have access to at the moment. You ungrateful enough. Clara's voice cut through the air like a clean blade. Everyone turned. Her cheeks were still damp, but her gaze was the clearest I had ever seen from her. For the first time, she was not looking down, not shrinking, not smoothing conflict to maintain appearances. She was standing in herself. "Stop blaming each other," she said. "You both did this." Miranda recoiled. "Clara, do not talk to us like that." "Why not?" Clara asked. "It is the truth." Her voice cracked on the last word, not from weakness, but from the weight of years spent holding things in. Benedict glared at his daughter. "You are being dramatic. This is a private matter." Clara shook her head. "No, it is a pattern. And tonight, finally I see it." Miranda reached out to touch her daughter's arm. Clara gently pulled away. Silence rippled outward like a shockwave. I leaned back slightly, watching the clash unfold, not intervening, not provoking, simply observing the same way I had observed the collapse of Fortune 500 companies. People seldom fall because someone pushes them. They fall because they lean too hard on illusions they built themselves. Ray Delgado remained stationed a few feet away, not interfering, but fully alert, a neutral witness, a steady presence. Miranda tried to regain control. Her voice softened into a brittle, trembling veneer. "Clara, sweetheart, you do not understand what it means to grow up with nothing. You did not live through what I lived through. My mother worked 3 jobs. I shared 1 pair of shoes with my sister. We had nights where we ate crackers with water. I swore I would never let my child feel that kind of shame." Her voice cracked. "And so yes, I fight for standards. I maintain appearances. I fix what I can. I provide. That is not a crime." Her breathing turned uneven. Tears slipped down her cheeks, surprising even herself. I watched the way her fingers gripped the napkin, the tremor in her arm, the old fear crawling back into her expression. I recognized it instantly. Poverty does not just scar people. It teaches them to build walls so tall they forget what they were meant to protect. I leaned in slightly, my tone measured. "Miranda, your fear of poverty became your weapon against others." Her head snapped toward me, eyes wide. "What did you say?" "You used the fear that shaped you to shape the people around you," I said softly. "You called it stability. You called it standards. But it was fear. And fear does not protect. It controls, it humiliates, it pushes people away." Miranda's breath stuttered. She clutched her napkin so tightly it tore. Benedict scoffed, grabbing for logic he no longer owned. "You are twisting things. Miranda is a fine woman. She only wants what is best." "Then why," Clara whispered, "did she treat Leo's mother like that?" Benedict stiffened. "I am sure she meant well, no?" Clara said. "She meant to control. She meant to evaluate. She meant to decide who was worthy." Her voice trembled, but her resolve did not, and I let her. Miranda looked devastated. "Clara, how can you say that?" Clara lifted her chin. "Because it is true." Her voice was soft now, heavy with a lifetime of realizing things too late. "You taught me how to dress, how to behave, how to choose friends, how to speak, how to never show weakness. But you never taught me how to be kind. You never taught me how to see people without measuring them." Miranda shook her head violently. "I did all of that to protect you. From what Clara whispered, from becoming poor, or from becoming human." Miranda froze, stone still. Even Ray, standing nearby, lowered his gaze in a moment of quiet respect for the truth landing where it needed to. Leo reached for Clara's hand under the table. She gripped it desperately like someone who had been drowning above water. Benedict tried to salvage control. "This is ridiculous. This night has been blown out of proportion. We should all go home and know," Clara said. The word hit the table like a hammer. Miranda turned toward her daughter, eyes rimmed red. Clara looked directly at her mother, voice cracking like old ice. "I do not want to become like you, Mom." And just like that, the final irreversible fracture spread across the table. A crack. No money, no diamonds, no curated image could repair. Clara's final words. I do not want to become like you." Mom hung in the air long after the sound faded. The restaurant around us resumed its rhythm, but our table stayed suspended, frozen in a silence that felt heavier than any argument that had come before. Miranda was the first to move, not with anger, not with pride, but with confusion. Her hands trembled as she gathered her purse. She stood slowly, almost unsteadily, as if her body was trying to adjust to the loss of a shield she had carried for decades. "I need a moment," she whispered. She stepped away from the table, her heels tapping against the marble in uneven rhythm. The walk of someone who suddenly did not know where to place her weight. Benedict remained seated. His eyes were fixed on the bill holder on the red banner error message, still glowing in his mind. He wasn't thinking about Miranda or Clara or the damage done. He was thinking about power slipping through his fingers. The thrill in the air had dimmed into aftermath. Clara turned to me. Her face was blotchy from crying, but her voice was clear. "Quinn, I am so sorry for everything. For tonight. For how they spoke to you. For how I let it happen." I lifted my palm between us. "No, not today." Her breath caught. I continued calm but firm. Real apology needs reflection, space, honesty. You are emotional right now, and that means you are reacting, not understanding. Clara pressed her lips together, nodding slowly, a gesture of someone hearing an adult truth for the first time. Leo shifted beside her. His voice was soft but full of sincerity that trembled at its edges. "Mom, I am sorry. Really sorry. I should have prepared you better. I should have set boundaries sooner. I should have stood up for you at the table." I turned to him. Leo was not like them. He never was. He carried his father's gentleness, his own patience, his own quiet decency. I reached for him, pulling him into a slow, grounding embrace. His shoulders shook once. Just once. "You did not hurt me," I whispered. "But you learned something tonight. That is enough." He nodded into my shoulder. When I released him, he wiped his eyes quickly, embarrassed by the display of emotion in public. But Ray Delgado, standing at a polite distance, gave him a reassuring nod. Even grown men need permission to feel. Clara took Leo's hand under the table. Her fingers intertwined with his, gripping tightly, not out of fear, but conviction. "We need boundaries, Leo," she said quietly. "Real ones. With my parents. With the expectations. With everything." Leo nodded. "No more allowing them to dictate our lives," she added. Her voice was steady. The kind of steadiness that comes only after a fracture. Miranda reappeared near the entrance. Her eyes were red. Her shoulders slumped. She looked smaller. Not physically, emotionally. She walked past us without a word, her purse clutched against her chest, as if bracing for a cold wind only she could feel. For the first time since the night began, she had no armor. She reached the door and paused about to say something, but stopped. Instead, she simply stepped into the night and disappeared beyond the glass. Benedict stood after a long moment, not dignified, not confident, just stunned. He cleared his throat. "I will follow her." But he didn't move immediately. He stared at the door with an expression I had seen many times on executives who suddenly realized that no salary, no portfolio, no savings could protect them from their own reflection. His voice cracked. "Money cannot fix everything." He sounded like a man tasting that sentence for the first time. Then he turned and walked toward the exit. No swagger left. Just a man trying to catch up to the consequences he helped create. When he was gone, the tension finally loosened around us. The waiter returned cautious, apologetic, carrying a tray of fresh water. "Is everything all right at the table?" he asked gently. Leo nodded. Clara murmured a thank you. I offered a small smile. "We are fine." Ray Delgado stepped closer. "Ms. Marcel, if you ever need anything, you know how to reach me." "I do," I said. He tipped his head respectful, then left us to our evening. The three of us sat in the softened quiet. Not awkward, not painful, just real. Clara inhaled slowly the way someone exhales the first truth they've ever told. "Thank you," she whispered. "Not for paying, not for tonight, but for making me see." I placed a hand over hers. "You did the seeing yourself." Her eyes glistened again, but not from shame this time, from relief. The manager offered to call us a car, but I declined. I preferred to walk. The night air had a clarity that felt necessary. Leo squeezed my shoulder once more before leaving with Clara. They walked down the street together, holding hands tightly aligned for the first time. When I reached home, a warm glow spilled from my front porch. Elodie sat on the steps, a steaming cup of chamomile tea beside her. She looked up when she heard my keys. "You're back," she said. "Sit down, drink this. Let your mind settle." "You did the right thing." I sat beside her. The warmth from the cup seeped into my palms. She studied my face the way only true friends can, reading the tone beneath the expression. Then she asked the question with a little smirk. "So? Did you tell them about the time you saved that CEO?" I exhaled softly. "No, they do not deserve that part of me." Elodie nodded. "Good," she said. "Some stories are too valuable for the wrong audience." Her voice softened with pride. "Chi Lam Jung." I leaned back, letting the night air wash over both of us. For the first time that evening, I felt something ease inside my chest. Not victory, not triumph, just a reset. The morning after everything unraveled, I woke before sunrise. Habit, not obligation. I tied my shoes, pulled on a simple coat, and stepped outside into the cool air. The world was quiet. Not the tense silence of a restaurant confrontation, not the held breath of judgment, but the quiet that comes from a neighborhood waking slowly. A dog barked distantly. A sprinkler clicked on. A newspaper landed on a driveway with a soft thud. I walked my usual route. Past the maple tree that shed early past the neighbor who always overwatered his lawn, past the bakery that smelled like warm yeast and hope. Each step loosened the knots still lingering in my chest. That night at the restaurant had been loud in every way that mattered, but mornings like this, cool, steady, unadorned, were the kind of wealth no one could measure. 3 days passed. Then just as I settled into my kitchen with a cup of coffee, the doorbell rang. Through the window, I saw Clara. No makeup, no carefully styled hair, no luxury handbag, just jeans, a cardigan, and a face stripped of every layer society had placed on her. She stood there as if bracing for weather she knew she needed to endure. I opened the door. "Hi, Quinn," she said quietly. Her voice trembled not from fear, but from honesty. "Come in," I said. She stepped inside, looking around as if seeing my home for the first time, not judging it, not measuring it, just noticing. We sat at my small, round table. She traced the rim of her mug with her fingertip before speaking. "When I was growing up," she began, "my parents were always afraid. Even when we had enough, they acted like one mistake could send us back to nothing. My mom kept every receipt. My dad watched the stock market like it was a life support machine." She inhaled slowly. "They lived in fear, so they raised me in fear. Fear of not being enough. Fear of losing status, fear of being judged." Her eyes lifted to mine, and I didn't realize how much of that I carried until I watched myself at that table. I sounded like her. I acted like her, and it scared me. I let her words breathe. "Healing needs room." She continued, "I judged you before I even knew you. I let my parents do the same, and when you sat there quietly, I mistook dignity for weakness." Her voice cracked. "I'm sorry. Not rushed, not desperate. Clean, earned." I wrapped my hands around my warm mug before answering. "Clara, fear shapes people more than poverty ever will. Your mother built a fortress around her insecurity, and she protected you inside it. But protection without compassion becomes something else." She nodded, tears slipping silently. I added softly, Simplicity teaches us to see clearly. When you stop performing wealth, you learn the difference between noise and peace, between status and dignity, between respect and obedience. Her shoulders relaxed as if those words loosened something tight inside her. She whispered, "I want to live like that. I want to be someone who sees people, not price tags. That is a choice," I said, "and you made it the moment you spoke the truth." She smiled then, small, trembling, but real. We spent a while longer talking about ordinary things, work, cooking, weekend plans, the kind of conversation people have only after tearing down walls that never should have existed. Before leaving, Clara reached for my hand. "Thank you for not humiliating us even when you had every right." I squeezed her fingers gently. Humiliation never changes people. Awareness does. She nodded and left with lighter footsteps. I watched her walk down the path. She didn't rush. She didn't shrink. She simply moved forward. Later that afternoon, my phone buzzed on the counter. A message from Leo. "Mom, I see you clearer now. I am grateful. I love you." I felt something warm settle in my chest. A soft, steady reassurance that things had shifted, not because of confrontation, but because of clarity. As the sun dipped behind the houses, casting long golden stripes across my living room, I sat down to reflect on what the night had really taught us. Wealth had been present at that table, in diamonds, in bragging rights, in menus and bank accounts and curated appearances, and yet none of it survived the truth. Real wealth had been something else entirely. Quiet strength, calm in chaos, integrity in the face of judgment, the ability to walk away unshaken. That kind of wealth does not flicker with a blocked account. It does not tremble when someone questions your worth. It does not need to shine to be seen. As night settled, I spoke softly, almost as if speaking to anyone out there who had ever been underestimated, overlooked, or misjudged by the depth of their simplicity. In the end, people do not fail because they have little. They fail when they cannot see beyond the price tag. Real wealth is calm. Real dignity is quiet. Then with a small smile, I added the final note. Not dramatic, not flashy, just honest. If this story touched you, let me know where you are watching from. Your voice matters. Thank you for staying with me until the end of this story. If it made you think, if it reminded you of someone in your own life, or if it touched a quiet place in your heart, I want you to know this. You are not alone. We all carry moments when we were judged, underestimated, or looked at through the wrong lens. But every time we choose kindness over pride, clarity over fear, and dignity over noise, we win something far more valuable than approval. Down below in the pinned comment, I left a small message for you. It is a reminder that your story matters just as much as mine. Feel free to share where you are listening from. I would love to see how far our stories travel. And if you want more quiet victories and heartfelt lessons, you can tap follow or subscribe. It helps these stories reach someone who might need them today. Thank you for your time, your attention, and your presence. Take care of yourself. Take care of your peace.